Okay, welcome to the stream, which this is my like third or fourth stream. I'm gonna start uploading them to like podcasts and also to my at least the video of it to my podcast and YouTube, which are both called Special Interest on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever if you want to find it. Where do we want to? Let's start with some Marvel. So Sadie Sink, who a lot of people probably know from I think mostly just like from Stranger Things, right? I think she's been rumored for like some kind of Marvel role for like a few months now, mostly like X-Men stuff. And she's been all over these X-Men rumors of, oh, she's going to be Jean Grey, which I always kind of thought, that feels like too much of a fan cast, right? That feels like all of those like stories that turn out to be bogus that are just based on, hey, there's a prominent actor that is either visually similar to a well-known comic book character or was like in a particular role that is kind of similar to that character, and so we're gonna do all these fan castings saying, oh well, they're going to, or they have to play this character in the movie that they're now making. Like I remember it happens all the time with like Lex Luthor, for example, right? Like when there was, I think it was like Billy Zane was in Titanic and he was a bald character that was like a dick. So everyone was like, oh, he has to be Lex Luthor, because I think at that time, like the what became like Superman Returns was still in development. And Sadie Sink kind of fits both of those, as she is a redhead. She's generally plays a teenager, and I think people mostly seem to assume that we're going to start with our sort of central X-Men as mostly being teenagers. Like I would assume if we're getting to like, Wolverine and like Storm, I feel like those characters I would imagine being a little, being a little older. But feels like the central character will probably be like teens or late teens to early 20s. And there have been a lot of X-Men rumors for a little while now, and when it was just her, I was kind of thinking, I think that's made up. When we started getting more and more, and it was like, okay, looking at more of like a specific kind of range for when the movie would even come out, and that it's apparently like one of the next things after they wrap up these Avengers movies. And when there were other castings or like people they were looking at or in talks with, supposedly like even ones that are less obvious, less, oh well, every fan caster was talking about this, like when they were talking about Harris Dickinson as as Cyclops, or Julia Butters, who like people might know from American Housewife, the sitcom, or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where she played the little girl, but she's obviously a bit older now. Like those ones feel, or her as Kitty Pryde, those ones feel perfect, but not like obvious, not like things that okay everyone was talking about. But once you bring them up, oh yeah, that is actually great. That feels like something people at Disney would actually pick. Anyway, so Sadie Sink has actually been cast in a Marvel project. It's just not one of those, which either could discount, okay, whether those rumors about her being looked at for Jean Grey were true, or it could be something that does happen fairly often with Marvel, where they're and other studios, obviously, but like where they're talking about them for one particular role, and that turns out, you're not quite right for this, and we're going to keep looking, but you'd be great for this other role, right? Like I remember, Chadwick Boseman, who played, rest in peace, who played T'Challa, Black Panther. He originally auditioned for Drax, and if you watch, it's like one of the like MCU documentaries. I forget which one, but where they show a lot of the like auditions for like MCU actors that originally auditioned for like different different roles. You watch his audition; it's a great audition. It's just like, no, that wouldn't have worked for that movie. That wouldn't have worked for that particular, at least the version of that character they chose to go with. Like I could see a different movie, a different version of the movie where he could totally nail a really different and interesting version of Drax. Anyway, Sadie Sink has been cast in Spider-Man 4. That's going to be, still obviously still starring Tom Holland as Spider-Man, and directed by, this time, the first Tom Holland Spider-Man movie that's not directed by John Watts, which even though I loved those movies, but I kept wanting, give me something different, right? Give me let someone else get a chance to do Spider-Man, especially having, Destin Daniel Cretton, who directed Shang-Chi, which was fantastic. Like, probably still, I would think of as like one of the best Marvel movies, since the Infinity Saga ended, right? Since Endgame. Like, yeah, like I'm not sure if there's anything I would put above it, right? Um, where he had like, especially because his choreography, his fight choreography and the action, all of that was fantastic. And see if we're gonna see some element of that applied to Spider-Man. Like, I think that would be amazing. Maybe if they even, somehow, squeezed Simu and Shang-Chi into this for some kind of cameo, I definitely wouldn't hate that. But yeah, in general, I love that. Okay, someone else is going to get to give their vision of Spider-Man. So we're not just getting, this the same guy for, another round of movies. Because I feel like this might, depending on whether Tom Holland, does end up having kids, where he's apparently says if he and Zendaya, have kids, he becomes a father, he will immediately quit acting forever. So that would be a bit of your ticking time, which like he can do. I'm sure he already has like, millions just from like Spider-Man, so many millions of dollars, right? But like I imagine they're probably thinking of this as like almost another trilogy, maybe all with Destin or maybe with someone else, with different people for different movies. But so one of the first, no, the first casting for that movie, which is coming out, I think between the two Avengers movies. Sadie Sink is the first casting for this movie, which is like very interesting. I see a lot of people, again, kind of like what happened with her with Jean Grey, right? Just going to the most obvious thing, right? Okay, she's a young redhead. And they are describing her as like the co leads, like the female lead of this movie, which I also love because I've seen so many people kind of assuming or wanting or expecting, Zendaya and I forget his name, but the guy who played Ned to come back for this movie. I really don't think they will, and I really hope they don't, because I feel like at the end of No Way Home, I feel like I feel like you entirely cheapen and kind of ruin the ending of the last movie, where you have, Peter realizing he has to move on from those friends to protect them. I feel like you really cheapen that ending uh, if you just bring back Zendaya and Ned and find some way for them to, get their memories of Peter back. Because I think no, he needs to have that sacrifice, right? He needs to lose that. And also, I think for this, like if this is like a new series of Spider-Man films, I feel like they do need to basically soft reboot it, right? You need to, I think I hope there's a somewhat different interpretation of Peter. I hope he acts very different and like more mature, right? More of your like sort of college age Spider-Man than like another bunch of like, high school feeling movies. I hope he matures more as a character. I hope he sounds different. I hope he has less of like that high pitched voice that Tom Holland tends to like to use for, particularly for his American characters. Um, And yeah, having a totally new supporting cast, I pretty much want everyone except for Peter to be like a new character. Um, uh, but yeah, so like with Sadie Sink, the same thing as that happened with her, being fan casted as Jean Grey is kind of happening here, where everyone that might be somewhere in these tweets. Come on. But yeah, so a lot of I guess there's this one tweet from Discussing Film where there's a I guess there's theories that she's going to be introduced as Jean Grey and Spider. They're trying to combine these two rumors. Well, this one isn't a rumor anymore, right? This one is like official. Um, but they're trying to combine this thing of Sadie Sink is going to be in Spider-Man 4, which I would consider proof that, okay, she's not Jean Grey, but they're trying to combine that with, they're trying to merge those two and say, oh, she's going to play Jean Grey in Spider-Man 4. It's like, especially her being announced as like the female lead of the movie. The female lead of Spider-Man is not going to be Jean Grey. He's not going to, like, I assume this is possibly, you know, his new love interest. She's not going to be Jean Grey is not going to be dating Spider-Man. I'm going to tell you that, right? This is probably, they realized, okay, we don't quite want her for Jean Grey, but she'd be great for whatever, you know, character we were already planning to co-lead in Spider-Man. And a lot of people are also going to, oh, she's going to be Mary Jane. First of all, like Mary Jane, MJ in the MCU was, you know, Zendaya, was Michelle Jones. That was their interpretation, their different version of MJ that they chose to do for the MCU. Now, you might like it, you might not like it. You might think, okay, no, there were some missteps. You could have done that better. She should have been more, more comic book accurate. But that's the version they did. And what I would say about, I really liked Zendaya's version of MJ. Obviously, totally different from anything you would really get in the comics. But I thought it was fairly interesting, particularly as like I remember seeing this one, you know, YouTube video essays that kind of made a really great point of, it's basically them trying to adapt Mary Jane by like having the spirit of what Mary Jane's introduction in the comics in the 1970s meant in the 1970s, trying to create a character that means all of that now, right? So when Mary Jane was introduced in the 1970s or 1960s, she represented the youthful counterculture. And at that time, the youthful counterculture was, you know, people rebelling against, their, stiffy parents by by like being a party girl, right? Mary Jane being like an outgoing party girl was her being part of the counterculture. But today, that would just mean, well, that would have a different context, right? That would just mean, oh, well, she's just like a normal, popular girl in high school, right? It wouldn't have the same effect. She wouldn't represent the same thing. So, what is, what is that version of like the counterculture in? When did the Spider-Man movies, the Tom Holland movies start? Like in the 2010s, right? Like 2017, I think. But like what that represents at that time, what represents counterculture at that time is, yeah, this more sort of, understated, cynicism, right? So I liked from those movies. I feel like in some ways you could have done the relationship a little better, but in general, like, yeah, I like that character, but I want something totally different, and they're not going to just introduce a different version of MJ, right? They already did their MJ. I think there's probably a really good chance. I think there's a really good chance that she's going to be playing Gwen Stacy. It might also be some kind of villainous character, or just probably not like just an original character, right? Unless it is something like MJ, where it's like a very loosely adapted character. But if I'm like taking a guess, I feel like Gwen Stacy makes the most sense, because I don't think you want to introduce. I think you probably want to introduce her for like a longer lasting thing, right? Not like not like some villain that's in the movie for that's in the MCU for one movie and then it disappears, right? I think she's probably in there for a longer commitment, especially if, hey, they were looking at her or thinking of her for Jean Grey for like a real long commitment. And like her not being blonde isn't an issue, because like I think the very first like cinematic representation, like live action representation of Gwen Stacy in Spider-Man was played by Bryce Dallas Howard, who I'm fairly sure is a natural redhead. Yeah. So not. Yes, that seems like pretty much everything. Yeah, it's all just repeating the same stuff. I'm surprised how few people. I thought there would be more people guessing that she might be playing Mary Jane. I'm just all seeing people either not making a theory or saying she's playing either Jean Grey or Mary Jane. First of all, nothing in the article says that she's playing Jean. That says she's playing Jean Grey, right? That they're fully just, hey, there was this previous rumor that said she was being looked at for Jean Grey. Like, I feel like, no, if she's cast in this movie, that means no, that other rumor is BS. Okay, so what's next? Oh, yeah. So this is from the U.S. House of a committee in the U.S. House of Representatives, where the chair introduces Sarah McBride, who is the first trans congresswoman in the U.S. Congress. That and all of the Republicans have just given her like basically had this like harassment campaign against her, where like when she was before she was even sworn in, this other congresswoman started trying to introduce a bill that would ban her specifically from using the women's bathroom, and eventually, like, because she just wants to like get to work, so basically she just relented and said, okay, I'll follow whatever the rule is, just let me sit in the Congress. But like people are just, the official people in charge of the top Congress people or whatever, right? The leadership have officially misgendered her many, many times. Whereas clearly in this very intentional dickish way that you see, every annoying guy on Twitter saying, right? And so they do it again in this committee, but finally someone, one of her Democratic colleagues actually starts pushing back and standing up for her. And I do love, like, I think she's mostly just kind of resigned herself to it, that okay, yeah, we're in this super transphobic time, but I can at least have this little bit of resistance of, okay, you're going to misgender me, well, I'm going to misgender you, I'm going to call you Madam Chair. And I saw that also similar thing also happening for like another, I don't think this was an actual trans person, but there was this like city council or like southern state legislature thing where the citizen was addressing a committee and referred to the clearly male presenting chair, refer to them as Madam Chair, just make a point about, like, I think in that case they had passed some rules saying that we cannot be compelled to obey people's to use people's preferred pronouns. She said, okay, well, I'm not going to use your preferred pronoun. I'm going to call you Miss and Madam. Great. This is how they should react every single time. They're freaking disgusting. Yeah. So instead of and yeah, every single time something like that happens in your life or whatever, like, yeah, don't let them get away with it, right? It's one thing if, okay, they're making a mistake, right? I have trans friends, especially when a friendship is first starting, you're still getting used to a person. I have had people that, yeah, where oh, I keep making that mistake. Oh no, I meant, didn't mean to say that. But they get it, right? People will give you that grace, right? They're not gonna be, dickish about it, or whatever. But if you do it repeatedly, where it's clear you are not making a mistake, you are intentionally making a decision to be. I didn't share my screen. I'm gonna replay the clip because I forgot to share my screen. So everything I said stands, so we'll just watch it together.
Recognize the representative from Delaware, Mr. McBride.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ranking Member Keating, also wonderful.
Mr.
I'm
Chairman,
sorry.
could you repeat your introduction again, please?
Yes, we have set the standard on the floor of the House, and I'm simply.
What is that standard, Mr. Chairman? Would you
standard-
repeat what you just said when
I-
you introduced a duly elected representative from the United States of America? Please.
I will. The representative from Delaware, Mr. McBride.
Mr. Chairman, you are out of order. Mr. Chairman, have you no decency? I mean, I've come to know you a little bit, but this is not decent.
We will continue this
You
hearing.
will not continue it with me unless you introduce a duly elected representative the right way.
This hearing is adjourned. Recognize the representative.
Yeah, like he would rather like just cancel the whole meeting rather than just give an elected colleague the tiniest courtesy of like referring to them by their actual gender. Yeah, I mean I don't even know like much what to say. These people are just freaking disgusting. What do we have next? Oh, Sam Seder. So, yeah. So a couple days ago, Sam. Well, I think it was actually filmed a month ago, but a few days ago, Jubilee, which is a channel that does a lot of these sort of big kind of debates or different sort of talk shows, I guess, where they bring often liberals or progressives and conservatives together, or like they've done different. I've seen like religious people versus atheists, or fat people versus models, or like all these different things. But one of their shows is where they get like one prominent conservative host, influencer, whatever, and they go up against 20 liberals or leftists, or 100, or they do vice versa, and they bring in a liberal or progressive, and they go up against 20 conservatives, whatever. And they did this with Sam Seder, who is the really host of the great Majority Report, which I'd strongly recommend, find on YouTube or podcast app or whatever. And he really just like completely ran circles around them. I tried to do a like sort of live react thing a while ago, and it kept getting suspended. So like hopefully this will. I'm just going to show like a more limited clip from it. So like hopefully, because I've seen so many people on YouTube, on TikTok, on Twitch, whatever, do these kind of reacts to like full videos, and I don't see them getting pulled. I don't see them getting having their feed interrupted by the YouTube censor. So like hopefully this will still be here. But so this woman, probably like in a debate full of like these unhinged far right idiots, just getting completely taken down by a moderately intelligent liberal. This one like had to be like the craziest of them all. Where like this woman like first makes this argument about why abortion should be illegal in all cases, but then makes this goes full neo-Nazi, I guess that's the word we're supposed to use for like censors, where she full on says that she is a supporter of xenophobic nationalism. And it turns out, I found this a while after I saw it, that she is actually, because she does this defense of xenophobic nationalism being better, better for Americans. She is not a natural born American. She is a Canadian immigrant, right? So, like, very often with us with Canada, we are not sending our best in terms of like, there's a lot of great people we send. Ryan Reynolds is great. Ryan Gosling, the Ryans are great. Keanu, James Cameron. But politically, we send a lot of like the worst people to the United States. Think of Jordan Peterson. Think of Lauren Southern, who then became who was part of Rebel Media, and then the whole tradwife thing, and then became like the tradwife who stopped being a tradwife. Who's I said Jordan Peterson. Faith Goldy, I don't think actually went to the States. I think she's mostly stayed here. Anyway, here's some of what she had to say with Sam Seder.
That if you are
but it would be better for society. It would be better for everybody in society. And same with xenophobic what's the problem with xenophobic nationalism? Don't you think that's better for Americans in general?
No.
Like xenophobic
yes.
nationalism is better.
We should have a coherent culture. Everyone should be a part of the same culture. We should have assimilation.
Which do you get?
Like, you can have a coherent culture without and this is a lot of what I think she also talks about.
To choose what the culture is?
We already have a dominant culture.
What is
based
the dominant
on
culture?
European and Christian values and identity. That is the dominant culture.
White Christian,
it's rooted in European identity.
White, so
yeah, I kind of this, even when I was watching it, I found myself kind of thinking, it's not that shocking to me in retrospect that she is Canadian, because a lot of the I found a lot of the language she was using about a dominant European culture, about assimilation. I feel like I don't see those specific, sort of words as much in like American political debates, but it seemed very, very familiar to me as a Canadian, because those sound like, the words we use like when we're learning about, the cultural genocide of Indigenous peoples in Canada, or the residential schools, right? She sounds like someone who learned about the residential schools, in school or in, public discourse or whatever, and decided, no, that stuff was actually great. We should actually, that was actually a totally great thing. Because even like freaking Stephen Harper was a horrible right-wing prime minister, the most right-wing prime minister we've ever had, and possibly until, if, Pierre Poilievre somehow gets elected, which fortunately it's seeming somewhat less likely, but it's still very scary. Even he had at least apologized for it and said, oh yeah, that was, something conservatives were all for. And the first conservative prime minister, championed and basically created a system, the residential school system, Sir Johnny MacDonald. But, even he was at least able to apologize and say, oh yeah, this was wrong. Killing the Indian and the child, wrong. Cultural genocide, wrong. But she's like, no, that was awesome. We should do that again. We should keep doing it. And like something I feel like Sam wasn't quite able to say, with a lot of them, right? He was kind of caught off guard, because I think he was expecting this was all around, he creates a prompt, and this prompt was, unless you're a, Christian nationalist, religious fundamentalist, a billionaire, or a xenophobic nationalist, voting for Trump is a mistake. And the assumption would be, well, of course, these normal people, presumably, you would think that's who they would get. Presumably, any rational, human being is going to say, no, I'm not Trump isn't for xenophobic nationalism. I'm not a xenophobic nationalist. And, then he would, say, well, this is why I think, Trump's policies are supporting xenophobic nationalism. But no, she's full on saying, nah, yeah, I agree. That's awesome. Well, I think at one point she does actually say that Trump isn't a sufficient xenophobic nationalist because of certain like immigration exceptions like H-1Bs, right? He's not just shutting down the border entirely. So that's her sort of criticism. I think she even said, oh, he's like a Democrat or a liberal from 15 years ago, which is I would not agree with. But like Sam doesn't. I saw some of these far right conservatives, like people from the Daily Wire, saying that, oh, well, he got owned here because he never offered an alternative vision of what America should be, or what the alternative to xenophobic nationalism, should be. And like, well, let's.
So your argument is
That
that
has been the dominant culture.
just to be
and
clear,
we're not letting people assimilate to that. We're saying you should keep your culture, and this is why our culture is so divided.
your argument is that Trump is good for those who want a dominant white European culture.
I mean, that is what America is. It's rooted in European identity and Christian values. That's what it has been. Would you really disagree with that? What is it then, if that's not the identity of America?
Well, I think the identity of
For the
America...
majority of time, America's been a country. You don't think that's been the identity?
Well, actually, no. I think actually the identity of America has been, for better or for worse, a melting pot.
Yeah, so I'm gonna make more of the argument for Canada and Canada's identity. I mean, she clearly left, possibly because she didn't like this so much about Canada. Like Canadians in general won't go for this so much as Americans might. But like Canada, for instance, is not a melting pot, right? We really don't like the melting pot metaphor, because I would agree with her that the melting pot analogy kind of implies, to me at least, right? It implies assimilation, which I consider really, really bad. I don't think people should have to assimilate or change their culture or their traditions or their spiritualities to be part of Canada, to be Canadian. I think you should be able, if you are, Pakistani, I think you should be able to keep those, all those aspects of your culture and your spirituality, but still be part of, the Canadian identity. Like, I think that's the really beautiful thing about Canada, that you can maintain your traditions, but still be part of a Canadian identity in terms of a civic nationalism, not an ethnic nationalism, and where all of these different, nationalities. And obviously, in Canada, there have always, there's always been tremendous diversity in terms of course, with the Indigenous people, the land that we currently understand as Canada was full of all sorts of different, cultures, Inuit people in Nunavut are incredibly different from, Anishinaabe or Mohawks in Ontario and Quebec, which are entirely different from, like the Squamish in BC. Like there's always been such tremendous diversity in this country. But from the earliest points of, outsider, exploration and colonization, there has always been, Indigenous people, Europeans like French and English, but also Black people, like from some of the earliest moments of Black people, of course, initially brought over as slaves, because to the surprise of some people, there has historically been plenty of slavery in Canada, not as much, not as much as in the States, mostly because our climate just didn't really support, say, a system equivalent to like the cotton picking or like very mass, plantations that you have obviously in southern climates. But like I think especially it's supposed to be like the colony of New France, I think, was supposed to have had a like really bad slavery, like just being incredibly cruel to their slaves, and Indigenous people were also enslaved. But like my point is, there's always been this racial and ethnic diversity in Canada. Obviously, I would say for most of the history of, say, the British colonies and the Dominion of Canada has been built around an ideology of white supremacy, which I think we always need to fight against and resist and work toward this ideal we have of a multicultural Canada, where we have all sorts of different people and cultures existing within the Canadian mosaic, within Canadian multiculturalism, and adding to it, right? Where Chinese or Indian immigrants can come over and not only be part of the Canadian identity and pick up the maple leaf and you know grab some poutine, play some hockey, right? Punjabi Hockey Night in Canada, I think, is like one of the greatest symbols of that multicultural civic nationalism that anyone can come and be part of. You'll see all the time. I wonder if I have the picture somewhere, but you'll always see newcomers to Canada, new Canadians, immigrants being like the most patriotic Canadians. And I would say, ironically enough, and this is probably part of why she lives in the States now, right wingers and far right Canadians, I'd say, are really like it's this interesting reversal of how things work in Canada, right? Are I would say almost some of the least patriotic people in Canada, right? Like I remember there was this poll, I think last year's Canada Today, maybe, where they polled different Canadians based on political party about how proud they were to be Canadian, how patriotic they were. And basically, the more left-wing you were, right? So the more you were part of like a left-leaning party like the Green Party or the NDP or the Bloc Québécois is kind of a special example, right? But or the Liberals, right? Then you were more patriotic. You were more likely to say you were proud to be Canadian. And if you were one of the more right-wing parties like the Conservatives or the PPC, People's Party to the right of them, you were less and less likely to say you were proud to be Canadian. And most of the things that people would think of as like, okay, what defines the Canadian pride, Canadian identity, are things that I would describe as progressive and left wing, right? It is about our multiculturalism, our single payer universal healthcare system, our generosity, peacekeeper programs. Even though like a lot of these things are quite flawed, and we don't necessarily have like peacekeeper. We don't really have peacekeepers anymore, right? But all of the I would think of the peacekeeper thing, I guess, more as like us not wanting to be warmongers, right? Us not wanting to be leading offensive wars the way the United States does. I would think of all of those pretty much as like those are ideals of the Canada that we want to be. That a lot of times we just kind of have to build, right? Like the American dream, right? And yeah, anyway, I mean that's probably why she left, right?
In that regard.
Yeah, maybe since like the 1960s. Even then, even we had this idea of a melting pot literally means assimilation too. It means melting. It means you're assimilating to the dominant culture. Is that not what melting means?
No, it doesn't mean
now
that
instead we're saying there's something wrong with xenophobia.
Culture. No. I mean, look, I got to be honest with you. You and I have a fundamental disagreement. We will never see eye to eye on this. It's a choice. And people, I think what you're expressing, though, is really what the Trump movement at its heart is about. And I think that's problematic.
I disagree. I don't think Trump's anywhere close to being a Christian nationalist. That's ridiculous. Trump's basically a Democrat from 15 years ago when it comes to social issues.
So you don't think that he's conservative enough for you?
Oh, definitely. Nowhere close. No.
He's not xenophobic enough for you?
No, he's trying to import a bunch of H-1Bs. Are you kidding?
Right. Oh, so you want to get them out too? Yeah. No, I think you're making my argument for me.
All right.
Well,
okay.
I'm just saying he's not even in this. Okay.
My next claim is
Oh yeah, I got this. Wanted to show. Oh, can I make this bigger? Wanted to show this Pierre Trudeau clip because that just got me thinking about it. Or not clip. Oh, come on, freaking ads. There we go. There we go. Yes, this is from Pierre Trudeau. Who, yeah, the guy who just left is dead. Quote, there is no such thing as a model or ideal Canadian. A society which emphasizes uniformity is one which creates intolerance and hate. What the world should be seeking and what in Canada we must continue to cherish are not concepts of uniformity, but human values, compassion, love, and understanding, right? Just really, sort of emphasizing, how the idea of Canadian multiculturalism, where, yeah, I don't, well, like when I think of a Canadian, I don't have like a very specific idea of what that means. And I think it's really stupid to think, oh yeah, every single person in this country has to have the exact same ethnic background and culture and whatever, right? We can have these things that do unite us. I think there is a Canadian identity. I think there are, sort of values generally held by, I forgot. Keep forgetting to share the screen. Here's the Trudeau, quote. I guess if you want to see it, I just said it, right? But where was I? Ah, damn. Right, I was talking about multiculturalism. But I mean, yeah, like I think it's really stupid to think like every person in the country has to have the same, language, ethnic background, has to look the same or dress the same. It's like it's a cliche, right? But there is something beautiful about how different we can all be, and you can walk down the street and see people from every corner of every corner of the world looking every kind of way, where you can have, a town like mine, right, where you have so many, you can go down, Princess Street and see, Canadian, American themed Canadian restaurants, Pakistani or Indian or Chinese or, yeah, I'm done. I think I'm done with this topic. What do I? Oh, I should probably not. So this is the trailer, which I should probably not play, at least in its entirety, or cut the volume or whatever, because I'm sure that would have like some copyright issues. But so this is I heard about this a few days ago. The studio. So Seth Rogen, who's been doing like some really producing really great like TV shows and stuff over the past few years. He is gonna be back in front of the camera again. I think like first time since like the interview the movie did like years. I think like 2013 with James Franco about these two like like entertainment news producers that go to have an interview with Kim Jong-un, which actually got like the actual movie like before it was released. It led to Sony getting hacked by by the North Koreans, and I think that was like his last like theatrical movie. I think that was the last like time he was really in front of the screen. And I feel like coincident. I don't remember if it was like if it did really well or not. I remember loving the movie. I've watched it a bunch of times. Was also like around that time when, especially like sort of mid-budget comedies and really just comedies in general really stopped being like commercially viable, right? That was when like, Will Ferrell and Adam Sandler and people like that had a bunch of who used to be these, major box office, guarantees. They're like, hey, if you do like a mid-budget comedy with these guys, it'll be a big success. It'll be like a blockbuster hit, right? The time when like basically the blockbuster comedy died and they had all these flops and they had to make deals with people like Netflix or wherever, because now, even though they're still making good, I saw Will Ferrell, movie with Reese Witherspoon on Amazon the other week, and it was good, right? Like not like his best thing, like he's had much better movies, but like that is something you probably would have expected. In the past, I could totally see being at least a softly successful movie. But no, I'm sure if they released that in theaters, it would have been like a flop, right? But yeah, like it was around that time that Seth Rogen, like I think that was like the last movie he did, and since then he's done a lot of really great TV shows. He did Preacher on I think that was Amazon. No, it was like Showtime or something. But then also, he produced The Boys, which is just like fantastic show on Prime. Invincible. So he's done like especially a lot of like comic book and superhero shows that I love. And he has this new show on Apple, called The Studio, which is this comedy about, I don't know if it's like half hour or what, but it's this comedy about where he plays this guy, I guess this like lifelong movie fan who somehow winds up as the head of a major film studio, and basically just this like satire, I guess, or this like satirical look at the American film industry at the like high studio level, which looks really, really good. And where he's clearly drawing from a lot of his personal experience. Also makes me kind of wonder if, is that part of the reason why because I think he's pretty much exclusively like doing television right now. Like I'm sure a lot of that is because, well, hey, his kinds of movies, like even though this show looks fantastic, I think it's probably going to be like a real hit. Apparently it's getting like really, really good reviews. But totally, if this was a movie, I would probably be expecting, it's probably not going to do that well. It's probably going to be good, but it's probably going to be considered like a flop at the theater, because these kinds of movies just wouldn't aren't going to be successful anymore, right? Even that Babylon movie, which was decent and also about not so much a satire as much as a kind of celebration of Hollywood and like a about the history and the the golden age of Hollywood. I think it did very badly at the box office. Like I'm sure part of it is, hey, his kind of stuff and stuff he likes to make won't generally be big successes at the at the theater anymore. But TV, because you can get by with much more of like a little more of like a niche audience. And also, I think people are more willing to see like the exact same concept as a TV show in 30-minute or hour-long or 50-minute, whatever, snippets than they are to buy a ticket, and as part of their subscription with the service, whatever. So much as they're more willing to do that than they are to like go buy a ticket and then have the theatrical experience, right? So I'm sure like that's part of it, but also I watching this trailer, I kind of wonder, did he maybe get burned out by the Hollywood system, and just felt like, hey, it's much easier for me to do this, where I can have more control and I can get the kind of stuff that I want made and not have to struggle that much with studios. But yeah, like I'm sure he's bringing a lot of his personal experience there. And I saw like a lot of like big actors in it as well. Like I think I saw is Scorsese in this?
I am so excited about watching this trailer. This is gonna be perfect.
Can we dim the lights? I got a meeting after this.
Being the head of Continental is the only job I've ever wanted. Yeah, I'm honored, obviously, to be one of the people that gets to choose, which movies get made and which ones don't. That's huge. And I got into.
It also makes me think of because right now we have. I'm sure this isn't supposed to be like that, right? But it makes me think of James Gunn, who was this writer and director in all these he wrote Scooby-Doo, and also mostly known for Marvel movies like the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy and DC's Suicide Squad 2, who in the past couple of years was made, very surprisingly, was made the first president of DC Studios. So he's going to be running a studio, probably never having even thought of ever having that power that he would ever even want to be the head of a studio, but as the creative head, still greenlighting projects. It makes me think about that, right? Someone who was this big fan of movies, who was a writer, but never never would have dreamed he would actually have this job, but now he does.
All this because, I love movies, but now I have this fear that my job is to ruin them.
Yeah.
The job is a meat grinder.
Prestige films and box office hits, those are not mutually exclusive. We can do both and we will do both.
Matt, I get it. You want to make great art and make $1 billion doing it. Well, guess what? That never happens, and you're going to screw everything up trying to make it happen.
If it was up to me, we'd be focusing on making the next Rosemary's Baby or Annie Hall or some great film that wasn't directed by a pervert.
Turns out perverts make great movies.
They really do.
Well, I low, okay? There's zero margin for error on this shot. Action, please.
I actually need to talk to you about awards season. Just make sure to keep your winter clear. We have
Okay, Matt.
This job is just so much harder than I thought it was going to be. Matt. What up, Matt? Everyone wants something from me. I can't give it to them.
If you guys are actually open to doing something different, I have a lot of ideas.
We love new ideas.
Just not too new, because we got a pretty tight formula that we got to hit.
I wouldn't say it's a formula so much as a structure that we 100% know works, so we're going to do it over and over again.
Fine is not good enough.
This is part of me does. I think this does look fantastic. Part of me does, because some of the things in it do seem like a very film Twitter sort of thing. I hope it gets successful, because especially a Veep for Hollywood feels like at its best what this could be, or better. And I hear people saying it's at least the critics, which I guess take what you will. I don't necessarily agree with mainstream critics that much, but we're saying it's the best comedy they've seen in 10 years.
Racist. You want to bring down the studio? Why didn't you shut this buddy?
Why do you keep lying?
What is wrong with
Yeah, that's what's her from Step Brothers and WandaVision, Agatha. What? Catherine Hahn.
The job makes you stressed and panicked and miserable. But when it all comes together, you make a good movie. It's good forever.
You'll have all these
Well, you're gonna get us all fired.
Yeah, it's great. Love that. Especially the whole formula bit. Some comments. What are people thinking about it? One of the most ambitious shows. The cameos are insane. Yeah, I mean because it's an Apple TV Plus show, by the way. I am consistently impressed. This must be where all of their money is going into, right? Because I think most of their shows don't seem like they would really be that expensive, but they have so many freaking stars, right? There's that one show they have with Brie Larson. There was the Jason Momoa one. They friggin' Shrinking with Jason Segel and Harrison Ford. There was a Michael Douglas, Benjamin Franklin show. There, and I was gonna say the hunting, I forget the name of it, but like the show where it's like hunting for John Wilkes Booth after he kills Lincoln. I can't remember if there was like major stars. I remember people I kind of recognized, but I don't think it was like major stars. Oh, and they had a show or a movie with like Sam Jackson and what's his name, the new Captain America. But yeah, they just seem to like have like, it's kind of weird how I don't think they have the recognition, but like they are kind of like the best streaming service right now in terms of like consistently having like consistently great original content, right? Like pretty much every show they put out. I mean, I think some of their initial ones, like the show C with Jason Momoa, I didn't love. I don't think I saw more than a couple episodes of it. But definitely on balance, their shows are, like just some of the best in television and streaming, period. And it's kind of, 'cause I don't think people, I feel like people still don't, I feel like people still don't generally have it or watch Apple stuff, or like maybe they're aware of like Severance, or oh yeah, Severance, and right, Adam Scott, and Christopher Walken, and uh that John Turturro. Yeah, streaming platforms should specify it's a show or movie when they announce something. Yes, they should. Yeah, I'm still kind of Scorsese. There's a show. I mean, he's not going to be. I'm sure he'll have like a one scene cameo in it, right? But yeah, Scorsese being in it, awesome. Yeah, I was sad about the franchise going away, but it looks like I'm getting more of it. Yeah, 'cause I still haven't seen that, but the franchise, which was another show of like a satire of the film industry, but more specifically superhero movies, which is obviously pretty ripe for making fun of right now. Which I gotta see. There's so many shows that I still have to see. And I think that got canceled after just the first season. How hard can it be to achieve a dream about making dreams? Finally, finally a film that truly connects to the common man. Yeah, like that's fair enough. Like that's the part of me that kind of worries. Okay, will a show? I mean, you shouldn't like watch a show and like, oh, that's going to do well, right? But yeah, part of me like, okay, I think people who have experience in the film industry are going to love it. The critics clearly love it, but there are also people that are, of course, very aware of and interested in the film industry, and would say if there is like a lot of, I don't know, like inside baseball stuff, right? If there's a lot of kind of in jokes of, hey, if you're a big film fan, that works for you. If you have experience in the industry or whatever, hey, that works for you. It'll work for film Twitter. Will it work for, say, a random person who watches movies but like isn't necessarily too aware of the inside baseball of it? Like you can, like a person who has never been in therapy, has never really thought about therapy, but is aware that therapists exist, can watch Shrinking and enjoy it, get all the jokes in it. Hopefully it's like that, and it's not too, whatever. Oh, this is a great point. Oh, because Succession was such a great connection to the common man. It's like, yeah, if you can enjoy a show about like a bunch of billionaires, fighting over who gets the extra billions, like you should probably be able to enjoy a show about the film industry, or like Game of Thrones. Like those are just about a bunch of fantasy medieval aristocrats. The movie Babylon was set as a modern TV show. Oh, that was Sarah Polley. It says surprise Sarah Polley acting appearance. You love to see it. I was kind of wondering because I feel like I was kind of wondering watching that. I think for a split second is that because I think I've only seen a picture of her once. But yeah, that's great. She's another a Canadian director. I guess presumably playing herself. But yeah, that looks great. Can't wait for that. What do I have here? Oh, this was my I feel like I got a decent form I going here. Yeah, so I'm gonna pause that. This is from Jesse Gender. Really great video essayist, both like political and pop culture nerd.
Hello, interwebs. I hope you are all doing well because I.
Okay, so pause. Good. And everything in between there. Talking about like the last episode of Daredevil, which I finally I started watching, when the first episodes came out, but I only watched the first episode. I meant to watch like the next one like the next day just because it was like late and I had school. But I never got around to it, and so I watched, I think around 8:30, watched the second episode with dinner, and then just sort of kept going and managed to watch the third episode as well. And like one thing that was like quite striking is how they are really pushing this sort of real world thing in Daredevil, where like if you're not aware, there's a lot of cops. I think especially in the States. I don't know if it's also a thing in Canada, but there's so many of these cops that really love using the Punisher insignia. So Punisher is a Marvel character who's known for, well, he's the vigilante that actually kills people, right? He'll go and if you have a murderer, rapist, whatever, he will actually kill them instead of just putting them in prison for them to escape. And there's a lot of real world cops that really like that idea, right, of someone who just goes and murders criminals. So they have started using the Punisher insignia. I remember hearing a lot about this, like in I think it was like was 2015, 2014, when there was a lot of the Ferguson stuff, and there was a lot of more awareness of how awful police are, and of course it really comes to a head in 2020 after George Floyd. So these cops that have Punisher insignia on their cars or on tattoos or whatever, as basically a signal that like, yeah, we want to brutalize, especially minorities, right? We want to assault people that we think deserve it, which is like a totally disgusting thing for like a police to be doing. And I think the creator of the Punisher has like called them out on it, said like, no, this is not right. I think they put that into some Punisher comics where they show that Punisher hates the cops that do that, and like we are not the same. Like the Punisher in the comics, I think is pretty much ACAB. In the context of the show, they have been doing more and more of this. Clearly, this storyline, because I think in the last episode or the last couple episodes, right, they have these cops literally, well, like they open an episode with people who we learn are a bunch of cops beating this innocent guy, this like informant, to death, and they have to for this vigilante to kind of come in and save them, or save the guy they were beating on. And then later on, they go and track down that guy so they can murder him, so he can't testify against them in this trial to defend the guy accused of killing a cop. I think the guy just, one of the cops that was beating up the innocent guy tripped into a subway. And they're trying to accuse the guy of, oh, you actually killed him, right? And so like they show cops in this show like doing really, really bad things. Like I don't think I've in like a mainstream like Marvel thing. Like this show is way more anti-cop like ACAB than the original one was, which I don't think anyone expected that. Oh, you take Daredevil and Punisher to Disney, and they will be more, anti-cop, right?
I am here to review
The show. I feel like wasn't really anti-cop at all. It was. Anyway, let me see what she has to say.
the third episode of Daredevil Born Again, this one titled The Hollow of His Hand, because what would a Daredevil show be without Catholic metaphors all over the place? But getting into this review, and full spoilers ahead, I am sorry that I did not say spoiler filled last week. I did not give a warning. That's on me. Apologies to all of those of you who are looking for a spoiler-free section, but full spoilers ahead right on here. This is another strong episode of the show, and actually, frankly, one that I found to be not exactly amazing or stand out, but did do a lot of work to finally deal with some of the issues that I was having with the show last week, which was I was unsure where the forward momentum of the show was.
Yeah. I love the show personally. I love that we have I love that we have a show like a Marvel Disney Plus show where we can have basically a whole episode of just, especially that show being Daredevil, where we can have a whole episode of basically just, courtroom drama. And, it reminded me so much of of course, like the Punisher episode of I think in season 2 of the first series, right? Which was one of my favorite, like when you think of the best episodes of that show. That's one of my favorites, right?
Was going. And I spent most of the beginning of this episode also feeling that, like, what are we doing with Kingpin? What's his goal here? What is he aiming at? He's become mayor, but then what else? What's going on here? And then the same thing with the Daredevil plotline. We had this stuff with him, being the lawyer for White Tiger and him defending that, but I also didn't see how all of that connected with Kingpin and the cop stuff and some of the themes that the series was wrestling with between vigilante and cops. And now by the...
I thought that was clear enough. I think I think it was already made pretty explicit, like in the first episode and the second episode, how much Kingpin is making this point of doing this campaign against vigilantes, right? Again, whether it's Daredevil to Spider-Man, right? That he's going to war against superheroes and vigilantes more specifically, right? Talking about street level heroes. And especially the way they ended this episode, right? It's like, okay, yeah, that is full, like declaration of war. Like Matt's gonna have to watch out.
The end of this episode, I really have a strong sense of like, okay, this is kind of the not only ideological direction that the show is going for, which I think is very interesting and very strong, but also much stronger idea of where we're going with the plot. I still have some questions about like what is the goal here, mainly to do with what the Kingpin's doing as mayor, which I'll get to in just a second. But on the whole, I'm like, okay, this finally sets us off on a good trajectory, which is kind of frustrating considering that this is the third episode of the show and kind of solidifies something that I really am going to be worried about this series for going forward, because something I did not realize when I did my review last week, I kind of talked about this, but I did not know the full extent of this. The show did do some rejiggering behind the scenes. It did film a lot of its episodes, and then during the writer's strike, Marvel decided to go back to the drawing board and change the series from what it was initially pitched as and change showrunners on it. And what I thought was, at that point, they had just completely reshot the show. Turns out, what I have since learned and what a lot of people have been talking about is actually what they did was they reshot the first episode of the show, which is what we saw last week, and then the final 2 episodes of this season, and then everything else, for the most part, is re-edited versions of what was already shot, with perhaps some extra things shot in there in little bits and spurts to kind of smooth over the changes that they made in those first and last 2 episodes. But for the most part, this is the stuff from what they were originally using, which has...
So most of the season... So it's like, if you're not familiar, like what she's referencing is how before... so like before the writer's strike, they had like a somewhat different version of the show where it was still like technically like in continuity with like the Netflix show, but it wasn't like it wasn't really trying to be a it wasn't trying so much to be like a continuation of the Netflix show, right? It was gonna be these same two characters that we know from it, but wasn't gonna have Foggy or Karen, and we would pretty much, I guess, just start with Daredevil having this, having this new life. And I think even there was one character that they had recast. I think Vanessa they'd cast as a different actor. And I've generally heard like there were major like tonal changes, and the show wasn't working. They totally changed it. So that's very interesting to me.
Has me really nervous because after watching that first episode and really thinking about it this past week, I'm sort of like, what was the point of it? It allows a little bit of a coda to the Netflix show, but in a way that kind of dismisses all.
Yeah, that makes the first episode like make so much more sense, because I remember like being so confused, like, okay, why did they even bring them? Almost, why did they even bring them back? Like, there's definitely an emotional thrill. I'm like, why did you bring Karen and all of them back? You kill Foggy immediately, which I get as an emotional thrill line for the season, but then you also immediately write out Karen, like, oh, she's moved to LA, and then Matt immediately meets a new love interest. He has a new legal partner. Like, I was so like, okay, why? Like, you're just writing out Karen? Like, why? So that's why, because they originally, Karen wasn't in the show, period. They just probably started with Matt, meeting this new person. Like, it at least makes it okay, we're transitioning from one show to the other, right? We start with the Netflix Daredevil, status quo, or at least where we left things, and then we break that, right? And transition into this new version of the show.
All the stuff that we found interesting, like Foggy and Bullseye and all of that stuff, and maybe they'll come back to that maybe by the end of the season, but ultimately it's just there to sort of like say, hey, you remember this stuff? Now we're getting into the things that we were doing with this show, and ultimately just explains how Netflix how Kingpin became mayor and stuff like that. But that's not the impetus for what's interesting about this show, which is ultimately what we kind of get into more with episode 2 and episode 3, which is, we have the emotional question of Matt and also Kingpin questioning on, like, can they change their natures? Can they try and do something new? But also is wrestling with this question of the society of law and order represented by cops and vigilantes who take things into their own hands, and what that means. And I find that to be a very potent, interesting question, one that comes to kind of an intriguing loggerhead here within the trial that we get in this episode, and one that sort of by the end of the episode has me go, okay, this is interesting to see how we can see how these ideologies are coming to a head. Because really what this trial episode was for me is it wasn't exactly a surprising trial. There was a couple twists and turns here, like Matt ultimately having to reveal that his client was the White Tiger, which I really liked, because then it made it be about, like, okay, are we going to go for trusting the cops or trusting vigilantes? But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's kind of very quick and easy. Like, there's a couple rough edges too, like when their informant turns on Matt, but all of it was stuff that I kind of predicted as I was going into this. So none of this episode really was like, shocking. But shocking doesn't necessarily need to be bad. It just, this episode I found to be kind of bog standard, if I'm being frank, in terms of a lot of the push and pull of the trial. But it does set us up on some interesting questions down the road. And I'm like, I wish we had gotten to this at the end of episode 1 or even episode 2 last week. But now we're doing it on episode 3. And it sort of makes me wonder, like, was what the initial show was doing this faster? And if so,
yeah, could be.
Then it makes me question what Marvel's choice to change this up was, because what they did in episode 1, which seems to be the stuff that they are most sort of putting their new stamp on, is not what I liked. So it has me curious about where is it building to, and if the final 2 episodes of the show are just going to be completely changing what we.
Yeah, that's something very interesting. Like, if this 3rd episode was more or less supposed to be like the first episode of the original version of the show, Like if it is only like the first 2 episodes and the last episode is like fully redone, the others are just kind of like editing around the margins. Like, yeah, that is very like, yeah, I could totally, like, when I'm thinking about it, I could totally imagine this, let's say this episode and portions of the second episode, I could totally see that as being like a premiere where instead of starting with Matt's life changing, we start with it having already changed, and he's just at this, he's at this firm, and the inciting incident, instead of being Foggy's death, it's just Matt. It's this guy getting arrested, right? And maybe it was like more generic about some bad thing happened in Matt's history and where he just stopped being Daredevil, right? Where it's just, I could imagine just being less specific.
We were going to be doing, and
Or he
ultimately
just
not paying
mentioned
off what I
Foggy
find to be interesting about this show, which is that question of cops versus vigilantes, law and order, the society of law and order, basically people taking stuff into their own hands, a community caring.
I really, really hope they don't like lose. I hope they don't lose their teeth in actually doing a full cops are bad, story
for itself, which is kind of the way it's being framed, because there's an easy way to frame
Especially
like
punishment.
vigilantes
That
in
is
a
so
sort of Batman-esque sort of way, like billionaires going down and punching the poor. But the way that this episode frames White Tiger, which is a man who is caring about his community, caring about others, and wants to go out and help them in a way that's like the community caring for each other, and then we get these cops who are only caring about their own institution, and we get their continual shots of the Punisher tattoos, which I am loving, because that is an interesting political statement about like how cops in the real world venerate the Punisher in a way that even the creator of the Punisher does not like, and sort of has this like vigilante, like takes things to my own hand because I'm the tough, strong man mindset that the sort of Punisher represents to these cops, even though that's not what the Punisher actually is. That's an interesting sort of way to use the iconography of superheroes in a way that's politically potent and really does talk about the institution of the cops as a problematic organization that upholds their own power and the status quo of power, which is also kind of represented by Kingpin to a degree, versus the vigilantes who are now kind of being represented of, caring for the community. And Matt kind of being in the middle of that, being like, I sometimes think I take things too far. I don't have anything to guide me other than like my religion at times, which sometimes comes up with him, or my own heart, and I don't really necessarily trust my own heart. So what do I have to ground me, especially now that I've lost Foggy, my guiding star, in terms of like the community that I had around me to sort of put me on the straight and narrow? That's an interesting question, and I really like that, and this episode gets us there at the end. So while this trial itself wasn't necessarily all that fascinating to me in terms of the push and pull of the plot, it gets us to a place that I really like, and that final shot, which, the White Tiger getting shot, not exactly surprising. I kind of expected it. I was like, yeah, he's going to get shot in 2 seconds.
Yeah, that one
was done by someone that looks like the Punisher. We don't know if it is John Bernthal's Punisher. In fact, I would be shocked if it was.
That one did, like, White Tiger getting shot, like, did really shock me, because I given how his character felt, I wouldn't have been that surprised. I think I kind of expected him to not necessarily make it out of the show one way or the other, right? Especially because I think White Tiger, I think is kind of more known like for like, because his daughter takes on the mantle, right? So I think it's more known as like her thing, I believe. And like I know they did like a Spider-Man cartoon where it's the the female version of White Tiger, and White Tiger's come up for me a few times in comics, and it's always the girl version. So I think that's more considered like the the prime version of that character. So like I kind of expected, okay, one way or another, he doesn't really make it out of this show, but I expected him to be in more of this season than he was.
I'm assuming he's going to be a cop who's saying he's the Punisher or venerates the Punisher, one or the other. And that iconography, that's like, okay, we can go somewhere with this. I can go into some of the nitty gritty of the trial. I've kind of already given my overview thoughts on it, but like, there were moments I'm like, oh, this is kind of, I almost groaned where I was like, oh man, are the cops really going to get his informant? They like, why wouldn't they have sent their informant to the courthouse earlier when the rest of the trial, like, they have to wait to the last minute, and just some false tension moments there where we could have just had the informant getting there earlier and have this like fake out here. So I'm like, okay, that's fine, whatever. The episode needs a little bit of dramatic action tension going on, and you know, the reveal of him showcasing the white tiger mask and sort of turning on his whole thing with the judge of like, oh, we didn't want to say he was the white tiger who's prejudiced the jury. That was kind of fun and interesting, but again, overall, the twists and turns and beats were like, this is good, I enjoy this, but not exactly the most shocking law story that I've ever seen. But it
pause. What was I gonna say? I also bet I also bet like we will get Punisher in the next episode, because especially the guy looking that much like you know, a Punisher, so much of full on like Punisher suit, Punisher copycat, right? I'm sure there will be a description of, oh, a guy dressed like the Punisher, or the Punisher, you know, killed him, and then I'm sure we'll have Matt, you know, tracking down, finding, you know, wherever Frank is now. Maybe isn't he in the trailer and he's like got a beard and he looks like he's in some like workout place or whatever. Yeah, so I wonder if he's like supposedly reformed, or I don't know, somehow like Matt knows where he is. And so like we get Punisher in first by Matt, you know, assuming that he's the one that killed White Tiger. And of course that can also play in pretty well to like what Matt's journey seems to be here right now, where he can, you know, because Matt's struggling with, okay, is he going to be Daredevil again? And especially with this internal darkness, and Frank, one direction or another, can probably help him maybe come more to terms with his inner darkness. I would still really love, especially with him struggling with his identity here and how he helped her come to terms with her identity as a superhero and a lawyer. I would love if, I don't think they're going to do it, not in this season, but I would love if they brought She-Hulk in to, you know, help with Matt in some way. I was even thinking of it in this last episode where they do mention like the magic amulet. I was like, oh, he could maybe use the help from an expert in superhero law. Anyway, that's yeah, I think I'm gonna call it there. Thank you for joining.